welcome to the Art of Being Human. We've started a series on human relationships, and when I started it, I didn't realize just what it was going to open up. What happens when you have been abused? What happens when certain things happen to you? How does it affect you, and how does that affect human relationships? So I've started talking about what happens when you've been abused, how it affects your thoughts and your feelings, and what punishment does to you. And I'm going to continue with that, but as I go through it, I want to go through the symptoms at a deeper level. I want to go through the symptoms, not just list them off, but explain what happens and why you have the symptoms that you do and how you respond to the symptoms that you have. Always remember that there's no such thing as a symptom without a cause. If you have anxiety, depression, you're panicked about something, you're uncomfortable, you don't want to be around people, you're nervous, well, there's a reason for all of those symptoms, and for the sake of your health, you need to find out what those reasons are. But just having and knowing the reason isn't necessarily going to bring healing, but it is the first step. If I know, for example, that I'm afraid of dogs because a dog has bitten me, then that doesn't necessarily give me healing from the phobia of being around dogs, but it does give me a start in understanding why I'm afraid of dogs. I've been bitten, but just that knowledge itself is not enough to heal me. I need more work with the area. I need to be able to be introduced to dogs who I feel are non-threatening and gradually work up to the fact that I can be around big dogs, little dogs, dogs that yap a lot, dogs that don't yap a lot, and feel comfortable. If I'm afraid of crossing a bridge because I saw an accident on a bridge, that's a simple phobia. I need to be reintroduced to going across bridges, looking at pictures of bridges, going up to a bridge, walking around a bridge, and gradually get myself to the point where the fear does not bother me anymore. Well, it's like that with abuse. You have certain fears, you have certain thoughts about yourself, and you need to be healed of all of that. Now, I'm not your therapist, and I'm not trying to be a therapist, but I can point you in the right direction of understanding where your symptoms come from and little things that you can do to make your symptoms better. So I want to do a little review today, and as always, I'm going to say this probably every show that I do on human relationships and abuse. If you have been abused, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything to cause it. You couldn't have done anything to prevent it. And it's just one of those things that you have to have healing from. Don't blame yourself if you have symptoms. Don't think of yourself as being a weak person because you have symptoms. It's all pointing to something that's happened to you in the past that you had no control over. Do not blame yourself. I know I'll be saying this over and over and over again. As I read off symptoms that have to do with abuse, of course you're going to be tempted to say, yeah, I shouldn't have that. I should have more control. I shouldn't be nervous. I shouldn't be anxious. But you can't help it. And it's easy enough for anybody, such as myself, to read off a group of symptoms. But those symptoms are very intense. You can have very intense anxiety. You can have very intense fear. You can have very intense depression, and the word by itself, and my listing it off by itself, is not the healing. It's the recognition that the symptom is there, but we need to go into it in a more intense way so that you can get the help that you need. So I'm going to be on this for a while. We won't finish with it today, but we will finish with it at some point, and hopefully by the time that we finish with it, you'll have a much more recognition of what's going on with you and what you can do to help yourself. Now, if you've never been abused, you'll say, oh yeah, I get that. Why do you have to repeat that? I understand that. But if you have never been abused, you don't have trouble with the issues that I'm going to be raising. If you have had abuse and you do have trouble with the issues that I'm going to be raising, then you have to realize that the symptoms are intense and you need to be reinforced. You need to be encouraged, and it needs to be reinforced that you're not to blame. And there are things you can do to help yourself, and you need to have that said to you maybe over and over again. When I was seeing children, and many of them were abused that I saw, I used to have to reinforce the fact and tell them every day that I saw them, it's not your fault. Don't blame yourself. You didn't cause it. You couldn't have stopped it. It's not your fault. Don't be afraid to tell me about it. Don't be ashamed. You know, it has nothing to do with your self-worth. You went through something you should not have gone through, and it was not your fault. So the things that I say to children, of course, are applicable to adults if you have been abused. Because I've seen people, adults who have been abused, and they've been carrying the scars of that abuse for years. And they haven't gotten any help until they came to see me, and they've been carrying all of that. And if you carry a load, it seems to increase with time. The more you worry, the more you're apt to worry. The more you fear, the more you're apt to fear. And it almost takes on a life of its own, and it has to come to a point where it stops. And although I'm not your therapist, I can point to you things you can do, little things that will help you. And if you need to seek therapy, please do so. Don't carry a load that you don't have to have. Now let me just do a little review. We started with an explanation of what abuse is. Excessive punishment, physical abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse where people are hit or kicked or thrown downstairs, emotional abuse where you're called names, or your mother or father or your caregiver said, "Why are you so stupid? You're too dumb to learn. I wished I didn't have you." And believe me, one thing you need to remember, if you have had emotional abuse, it gives just a scar upon you, just as much of a scar upon you as physical abuse does. It's actually easier to handle physical abuse than it is to handle emotional abuse. Emotional abuse where your self-worth is in question because your mother or your father said it was in question, that does more of a number on your soul than just being slapped or hit. Emotional abuse is something that is absolutely devastating, and it takes a long time to recover from it. Abandonment, what happens as a result of the abuse, you get false beliefs about yourself. I'm no good. Why am I here? I am not bright. I am stupid. I can't do anything right, and so forth. The fears we'll get into, the negative emotions which go along with the false ideas about yourself. Nothing's good. Nothing's ever going to be good. Nothing good will ever happen to me. I have no future. All of those emotions or those thoughts and those feelings, they're intertwined together. If you have one, you probably have several others, and there's a joining of them. They do work together. Unhealthy behavior where you act out. You know, if I'm told that I'm no good, I'm going to prove it by acting like I'm no good. How do I act like I'm no good? I get into trouble. Now, here's an example I've used some about prostitutes. Prostitutes know that what they're doing is not right. And what do? They feel bad about it, so what do they want to do? They want to punish themselves. How do they punish themselves? By doing the very thing that made them feel bad to begin with. And so it is with adults and children. You feel badly about yourself because you're doing something wrong and you know you shouldn't be doing it. And if you're not being punished and you feel like you should be punished and you're carrying around a sense of guilt, what you do with that sense of guilt is that you want to punish yourself to get rid of the guilt. Guilt is a very, very uncomfortable feeling. So what you do is you're going to punish yourself to get rid of the guilt. But the way that you punish yourself is to do the very thing that got you in trouble to begin with, because that makes you feel more guilty, and that's a type of punishment as well. So I feel guilty, I punish myself by making myself feel more guilty, and it gets to be a cycle, one thing after another. I steal, I feel guilty about stealing, I know I'm going to be caught, nobody catches me. So what do? I go back and I steal. Why do I steal? In a sense, hoping somebody will catch me and stop me, and then I can get punished for the thing that I feel guilty about. And then if I'm punished for that thing that I feel guilty about, then I don't have to feel guilty anymore, because the punishment replaces the guilt. So if I feel I'm not being punished enough for what I'm doing, whatever it is, I'm using stealing and prostitution as an example, but it could be anything else. What do? I do something to make myself feel guilty, and that's punishment for doing the things that make me feel guilty. Now, I know that it sounds like round robin when I explain it, but psychologically, that's what's happening. You do something, you feel guilty, you want to be punished, you want to get rid of the guilt, so you do something, the same thing that made you feel guilty, but instead of getting rid of the guilt, it increases the guilt, increases your need for being punished, and then you end up by doing it over and over and over again. And people get themselves trapped. They get themselves trapped in pornography, internet pornography, stealing, doing all kinds of things they shouldn't do, and then wishing they weren't doing it, but not getting punished enough. The degree of punishment is important to you if you feel you need to be punished. You know, it's not just a slap on the wrist. I need to go to jail. I need to have more severe punishment. So I do something to bring on the punishment to myself. And it gets to be a vicious cycle, and it's something that you do not get out of. It's something that you get trapped in. So what you need to do is to break that cycle and get out of that cycle. And realize that if you've done something wrong and you need to be punished, that's one thing. But don't punish yourself over and over and over again, because that's going to accomplish nothing but make you feel even worse. So we'll be getting into that. Negative emotions, unhealthy behavior leading to guilt and to shame. Let me pull this off. You will have, if you've been abused, and this is not your fault, I'll be repeating this forever, but if you have false beliefs about yourself, negative expectations, never being good enough, fear of being abandoned, never being wanted or fearing that you will never be wanted, feeling that you must have control in order to have security, feeling that you must be right but you know you're not, feeling that you're not worthy of love, not worthy of success, and finding that you cannot make decisions, or wondering if you're able to make decisions, or even if you're allowed to make decisions. Let me go through these one by one. The negative expectations first. You feel, if you've been abused, that somehow nothing good is ever going to happen to you. Nothing good will ever happen to you. Well, that means that you'll never get the job you want. You'll never marry the person that you're going to love. You'll never get a new house or a new apartment. You'll never be able to make headway in your life toward the goals that you'd like to have. Nothing ever good happens to me. And there are people who feel that nothing ever good happens to them. They really feel that. I wished something good would happen to me, but it won't. Now, supposing something does happen that's good, then what are you going to do? One, you're going to feel guilty because something good happened to you. Why would you feel guilty? Well, one reason is that you fear that you don't deserve it. You feel guilty that something good has happened to you because you don't feel that you're deserving. And so what happens is that you're apt to sabotage it. You have the job finally that you love. You have the job that you've been waiting for, that you've been hoping for. So what do? You do things to make mistakes, maybe not intentionally. You may not even be realizing that you're doing that. But supposing you have an important presentation tomorrow morning, let's say, what do you do tonight? Stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning. And so you're so tired you can hardly think straight when you do the presentation. You may not catch the link that you are doing something that makes it possible for you to mess up on tomorrow's presentation because you don't feel that you're deserving of the job. And I've had people come to me and say, I always do this before something good happens, and I mess myself up every time. Why do you mess yourself up every time? I don't know. They don't have a clue as to why they do it. They do it because they don't think they're worthy. And so therefore, they're going to prove that they're not worthy by messing up. How are they going to mess up? They're going to do something that makes it impossible for them to do the kind of job that they want to do. And it happens over and over again. And a lot of times it's very, very unconscious. They do not have a conscious awareness that that's what they're doing. They do not have a conscious awareness of the fact that they are deliberately manipulating a situation to make themselves look bad, so they will not get an advancement, or they'll be demoted, possibly even fired. They feel guilty if something good happens to them because they've been so abused. They feel so ashamed. They're taking the blame for their abuse, which is why I'm constantly saying it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. Don't take the blame. You don't need to. But they will take the blame. I was abused because I wasn't good enough. And so therefore, to have something good happen to me means that I'm unworthy of it, and I've got to mess it up. Because the one thing that a person will do, they will always act in a way that shows that what they believe about themselves, which is usually what they've been told, is true. So if you tell a child, you're not very smart, you're not very good, we know you can't do very well, then what are they going to do? If they're bright, they're going to do the same thing to prove that what their parents said about them was true. So they start failing courses. They start not doing their homework. They start doing things to prove that what their parents said about them is true. It's the same in a job situation. You're not very smart. We're giving you this job. We don't expect you to do very well. It'll probably only be temporary anyway. What do? You do things to prove that what your employer says about you are true. If you really want to destroy a person's life, you do it through the emotional abuse of telling them that they have no worth, that they're not very bright, that they'll never accomplish anything, they're not very smart, they don't look very good. And what'll they do? They'll make sure that that prognosis of your part is absolutely true in their lives. So they start looking slovenly. They don't do things right. They act like they're stupid. Oh, I don't understand this. I don't understand that. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You tell a person that they're not very good, they start to believe it, and then they start to act on it like it's true. Why not break away and say, that's not true about me. I am smart. I do deserve good things. I want to push forward. I want to make gains in my life. Why not do that? Well, a lot of people don't. But the reason they don't is that it takes so much time and so much effort. They have to break a pattern that they've had most of their lives. And it's harder to do that than it is to believe that what's true about themselves really is true. In other words, if somebody tells me, you're not very good, you're not very smart, you'll never accomplish very much, then it's easier for me to prove that true and be comfortable in it. Because that's what I think I am, because that's what people have told me. It's easier and more comfortable because it's secure. I know it. I know I'm not very good. I know I'm not very smart. And you get comfortable in that. That's a self-concept issue, but you feel more secure in knowing that you're not good than it is to prove that what they're saying about you is wrong. I can remember when I was in the 8th grade, the 8th grade teacher had to go to all of the parents and talk about their children. And the teacher, my 8th grade teacher, said to my father and mother, I was outside riding my bicycle, and the teacher was inside talking with my parents. And they said, well, they're okay, because I had a twin sister, so they were talking about both myself and my twin sister, and she was saying, oh, I guess it's all right, but you wouldn't want to bother to send them to college. They're not that good, you know. And my father said, are they smart enough to go to college? And she said, yeah. I mean, they could go to college. There's no reason why they couldn't go to college, but why would you want to spend the money? I mean, they're so average and everything. But yeah, they've got the intelligence. My father kicked her out. My father said, if my children want to go to college, my children are going to college, and he told her to get out. And she left. Never would I have ever heard from my parents, you're too dumb to go to college. It just never would have been. And I have 3 college degrees, and I'm an ordained minister, and I've run 2 counseling centers for over 20 years. I've had private practices. So to say that I wasn't qualified to go to college, it just simply floored my father, and he wouldn't hear of it. You have to be very careful what you tell children. You don't want to tell them that they're less than they are. If I were counseling a child or a high school student, they wanted to go into medicine, I would say, go for it. Go for everything you want to do. Don't hold back. If for some reason you can't do it, you'll find out. And then if you find out you can't do something, don't consider it to be a failure. It's not. The only time that it's a failure if you don't try. So, you know, there's a statement, don't be afraid for what you reach for and miss. You would miss everything if you didn't reach at all. And I like that statement, and I used to tell my students that. Don't be afraid to reach, and reach for all you can. And you would be surprised how much you can accomplish, far beyond what you could ever think. Because I really think most people are a lot more intelligent than what they give themselves credit for. So let's go on from here. This never good enough stuff. You can't say that you're never good enough. You are what God made you. You can accomplish what God allows you to accomplish. Never be afraid to reach out. There is a fear of being abandoned. That goes along with the abuse. Who's going to take care of me? If I'm afraid to be abandoned, then I'm afraid to make any false moves. I'm afraid to make anybody angry. I'm afraid to make any decisions on my own, because if I don't do things exactly right, I will be abandoned. Now, the problem with abuse is that a child who is afraid of being abandoned won't say anything about the abuse, because if they do and they get abandoned, who's going to take care of them? So they grow up feeling that they're not worth anything, but they have to have support, they have to be taken care of, and if they make their caregiver angry enough and abusive enough, then they will just be left somewhere. And then they will not be able to take care of themselves, and then who knows, maybe they won't even survive. Now, I think I'll close it here because we're running out of time. We are going to continue with this next time, and probably maybe 2 or 3 other segments after that. We do need to get through all of these so I can help you put the pieces together once we're finished. So I hope that you've learned from this. Please join me next time.